Light Food Tour, the Port City Plate podcast serving up the food, history, and people of Mobile, Alabama for people who love the Port City. I am your host, Chris Andrews, and I'm excited about today's show. We're going to talk Mardi Gras, Carnival in Mobile, Alabama. And, I mentioned in the intro, the Port City Plate podcast are all about the food, history, and people of Mobile. The first 3 episodes that we've had so far, we've talked about food. We've talked to restaurant owners. And so today we're going to talk some history. And I think there's no better authority on Mardi Gras Mobile than our guest today, and that's Steve Joynt. Steve's the founder, owner, publisher of the Mobile Mask. Mobile Mask started as a website in 2012. The first magazine was published the next year, 2013, and since then has become the go-to source for all things Mardi Gras Mobile. So whether, that's the beautiful print edition magazine that's over 100 pages full of awesome information, the website that's full of the parade schedules and the routes. It's a website that I use frequently, I know, during Mardi Gras. And then the Facebook page. You got the breaking news and the stories all throughout the carnival season. Mobile Mask got it covered. Mr. Mask, thank you for joining the Port City Plate podcast.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
So you and I do not have the same Southern accent. How did you end up in Mobile, Alabama?
Oh, a somewhat convoluted route, I guess. I was born and raised in Virginia, and my first job out of grad school was in Birmingham. I worked at the newspaper in Birmingham. I always wanted to be a newspaper man. Since I was a kid, and so I was in Birmingham for about 15 years, and then I came down to Mobile to be an editor at the Register, and I was there for about 11 years before I left to start Mobile Mask.
Okay, did you write about Mardi Gras Mobile?
It was funny.
Paper?
It was funny. I was an assistant city editor, hired as an assistant city editor, and I showed up, and very early on, the other assistant city editors and the city editor looked at me and said, "You're the Mardi Gras guy." And I said, "Okay, why?" And they said, "Because we're tired of doing it, and we've run out of ideas." And I'm like, "Okay, I can understand that, fresh perspective and all that." So I was familiar with Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Living in Birmingham, we went to New Orleans all the time. But there was a lot I still didn't know. So I taught myself really from the ground up. And got very quickly into the history and researching some of the questions I had about the things that didn't make sense, or the holes in the history and that kind of thing, and it went from there.
I know the paper used to have great coverage of Mardi Gras. I remember the Mask Observer and art and little sections like that in the paper.
They still do a Masked Observer,
okay.
But yeah, it's even I don't take the paper anymore.
I don't know if a lot of people do anymore.
I think I was one of the last holdouts.
So you quit the paper. I mean, that had been pretty daunting, I think, for you to quit your job at the newspaper to start a magazine, right?
Well, it was one of those things where I talked about it a lot, sitting on the back porch, and finally my wife said, "Look, either do it or stop talking about it." And so I did it. I took what turned out to be the last buyout. I left about 6 months before they announced all those big changes where they were going to 3 days a week, and they surely would have laid me off at that time because virtually all the editors were laid off at that time. So for once, I was the guy with good timing.
One of the things that you have written about and researched pretty extensively is on Joe Cain. And Joe Cain, I think it's undisputed that he's the founder of modern day Mardi Gras. But you've made a discovery in your research that leads us to believe that 1868 was the year of his celebration, not 1866 like it is quoted in almost every reputable publication, the Encyclopedia of Alabama. I mean, even the Joe Cain Cafe outside the restaurant that bears his name mentions his celebration in 1866. How did you come to this discovery that there were discrepancies in the date there?
Well, there are things about the Joe Cain story that from the get-go never made sense to me. you go back to the newspapers of that, and newspapers are, to me, a primary source. They're contemporaneous with what's going on, and if you go to Mardi Gras 1866, there's nothing. I mean, look, if a horse fell down in the street, it got into the newspaper. So if a guy dressed as an Indian with a bunch of guys in a wagon it would have been in the paper, and it wasn't. And I never understood that. And so I finally said, all right, well, I'm trying to figure this out. And one kind of the Rosetta Stone of all this was a short piece that was written by Joe, where he said, people always ask me, how did this happen? Well, here's how it happened. And what he said was, he went to New Orleans and he saw Mardi Gras and he said, wow, we should be doing that back at home. So he went to New Orleans for the fire department parade, which was the day before Mardi Gras. And the only time that matches up is in 1867. Joe was very active with one of the volunteer fire stations here, Washington number 8, which was a fairly famous fire department. And so when you match that, and I got, newspaper stories from New Orleans saying, oh, well, these guys from Mobile are here for the fire parade. Sure enough, in the list of people, there's Joe's name in 1867, right before Mardi Gras. So they had like the fire parade, and the very next day was Fat Tuesday. It was a late Fat Tuesday that year. So there's just, and then the first mention of Joe and the Lost Cause Minstrels, actually just the Lost Cause Minstrels, Joe's name's not even in there, is in 1868. And it's funny because when you read the coverage in 1868, the reporter is clearly confused as to what the Lost Cause Minstrels are supposed to be, because it was just one wagon full of guys dressed as monkeys playing instruments badly, very badly, like they didn't know what they were doing. It was just like just making noise, and that was it. And the reporter expected a parade and said something to the effect of, it's not clear where the rest of the society was, because what they were used to was the New Year's Eve parades, which were big, long things with floats and the whole schmeal. So this was, and I think what Joe brought to the Mobile celebration was a sense of humor. Because if you look at the Order of Myths, which was later that same night, they did the kind of thing that the Cowbellions and TDS and the Strikers were doing on New Year's Eve, and that is they would have a very serious theme. Their theme was Lalla Rookh. Have you ever read Lalla Rookh?
I haven't.
I don't recommend it. It is really long and boring. But that was this long poem called Lalla Rookh that they all apparently had to learn in school, and it was an Arabic type setting, and so it was an Arabic theme parade, but it was very serious. It was a very serious thing. It's literature and whatnot, as opposed to monkeys who can't play instruments. So there was a kind of a humor, absurdist humor, brought to Mardi Gras that I don't think ever left. I think the widows today are a tremendous expression of that absurdist humor. If you've ever taken someone to Joe Cain Day and they've seen the widows, invariably there's a conversation that goes, well, how many wives did Joe Cain have? Well, just one. Okay, well then I don't get it.
That can't be.
I don't understand why there's so many widows. But we get it, and it's part of the joke. It's just part of the joke. It's absurdist. And thank goodness Joe brought that element to it. I like to refer to Joe as the patron saint of Mobile Mardi Gras. It's funny because the way the story was told largely comes from Judy Rayford. And when Judy told it, he was faced with the conundrum of us saying, well, we had Mardi Gras first. Well, okay, then Joe didn't bring us Mardi Gras. Joe brought Mardi Gras back. So that's how the story went, because you couldn't run in conflict with that. Well, we had Mardi Gras first. But then you come to trying to define what exactly is Mardi Gras. And Joe was part of that first public display of Mardi Gras in Mobile, contrary to some things that have been written
on Mardi Gras Day.
Right.
And I want to get into the 1703 and that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that you mentioned, and I think that is what's significant about Joe Cain, he brought the fun to Mardi Gras. I think a lot of people at that time could not read or write, and so they probably had no idea a lot of the literature that was passing by them on these parade floats.
Right.
They had no idea what it even said.
Right.
And they probably could relate more to Joe Cain when he comes by dressed like a monkey, or not just or acting like monkeys and playing crazy music. They probably related a little bit more to him, right?
And Joe led, I think, directly to the Comic Cowboys and Dave Levi, not too many years later. And that, again, that started out as almost kind of a Mel Brooks type of humor, where he would, Dave Levi would put on a quote-unquote Wild West show, because Wild West shows were so popular, but it was a funny Wild West show. It was nothing made sense and that kind of thing. But not too long after, it started becoming satire, and it started even becoming political. So that evolved, but that whole sense of humor thing, yeah, you're right. It was much more for common folks. In fact, Dave Levi would construct the floats all by himself, different than what we're used to seeing today. It wasn't just wagons with writing on them. There were actual figures and whatnot. And but he would pull them up to a certain spot, and then he would recruit kids to ride on the wagons. There was no Comic Cowboys organization. It was just Dave.
Kind of the conversation we've had so far, it almost seems like we've kind of framed it as Joe Cain and Order of Mist may have been in conflict with each other. Their styles had maybe in conflict. But something was going on in 1868, right? I mean, Joe Cain had been to New Orleans and saw Mardi Gras there, decided that we've got to do that in Mobile, gathered his Lost Cause minstrels, but also at the same time, this preceded the first Order of Mist parade, the very first Mardi Gras parade in Mobile.
And when you go through the history of the Order of Mist and you're looking for that, there must be I definitely headed down that road. There had to be a connection, especially when you saw that Judy said something to the effect of Joe Cain was the first folly, complete made up, yeah. But there is no connection that I can find. And when you go through the Order of Mist history, you're talking about some young guys who were law clerks and the like, and they just got this idea. Bingo, bango, light bulb over the head. Hey, we should do. I mean, Mardi Gras was not unheard of. The Elks Lodge would have a Mardi Gras dance and things like that. But there was no public display associated with Mardi Gras in the city. And maybe they heard about New Orleans as well. I mean, it certainly had been in the papers for a few years. And when people ask me who was first, I say, well, without Mobile, there would be no New Orleans Mardi Gras, and without New Orleans, there would be no Mobile Mardi Gras. And that tends to anger people more than anything else, because it's not the answer they're looking for.
No, that's right, and I think it's a controversial thing, and again, you've written about it. I think people should definitely go to your website and read that article about Joe Cain. You've got an entire section on Joe Cain, kind of a lot about what we talked about. You've also written about the 1703 claim,
right?
And kind of what's your thoughts there on Mardi Gras? I mean, it's all over. I've got a hat, I've got a shirt that has 1703 on it.
Me too.
We all, I talk about it on our tour, right? 1703. But there's a little bit of historical discrepancies there as well.
Well, I'm not in the debunking business there, but and I'm not I'm not running around saying, oh, we weren't first. I'll wear the 1703 stuff. I don't get real bogged down in it because, again, what is the definition exactly of Mardi Gras when you say, oh, we had the first Mardi Gras? There are folks in New Orleans who try to say that when D'Iberville named some little spit of land Point Mardi Gras, that in 1699 that was first. Really? You want to hang your hat on that as the first? Two guys clanking their tankards together and saying Happy Mardi Gras. Does that constitute a Mardi Gras celebration? I guess, sure. Where did that happen for the very first time? That's anybody's guess. It really is anybody's guess. And what I said in the story is that Mobile has essentially established itself in a version of history King of the Hill, in which we've planted our flag up on top of that hill and said, we were first. Now come and knock me off this hill. Prove we weren't first. We can't necessarily prove that we were, but you can't prove that we weren't. And I've met plenty of folks in New Orleans. I was at a conference once in New Orleans for editors. This was even before I started doing Mobile Mask. And I was wearing my shirt that had, you've seen it, it's got that old 18 whatever photo of the court, and it says Mobile, birthplace of Mardi Gras, right? And this editor from the Times Pick was getting coffee next to me, and he looks at my shirt and he goes, Mobile, yeah, right? That was it. That was his begrudging acceptance, and I think New Orleans kids have been taught, and New Orleans folks have been taught over the years that we were first, because we've said it for so long that okay, we were first. But when it comes to, I like to concentrate on what we know as the modern celebration and what are the roots of that and when did that start. And absolutely that started in New Orleans, but there were former Mobilians at the controls who brought Mobile's knowledge of mystic societies and helped them form their first Mardi Gras mystic society, whereas up until that point we only had New Year's oriented mystic societies.
Right, the crew of Comus, for example, first Mardi Gras society in New Orleans, made up primarily of Mobilians and former Cowbellian DeRakin society.
Well,
right?
it was founded by a small group of businessmen, and several of them were businessmen who had been Mobilians and moved to New Orleans to expand their businesses. But yeah, and there's actually some arguments over, were they former Cowbellians or were they former strikers or were they both, and blah blah blah. But they clearly brought that Mobile knowledge to the founding of Comus. And Comus reached out to to those groups, and there's things like the strikers sent him a cake, and members of the Cowbellions came and attended their first ball, and things like that. So there's very definitely that connection. Mm-hmm. And so weirdly enough, it was New Orleans that convinced Joe to. That's what I mean by without us know them, without them know us.
Right. I think in my opinion, the 1703 claim, I think it's validated in a way because, unlike the Pointe de Mardi Gras, 1699, or the Mississippi coast, where there was just a fort on the Mississippi coast, in Mobile at 27 Mile Bluff, 1703, I think we not only had a fort, we had an entire town here. We had a town with homes and churches and a tavern. We had all that, and to me, and I think even the church being there is significant for the reason that we had a calendar, and the church would have obviously known that it was Ash Wednesday. There would have been an Ash Wednesday celebration in the church there, 1703. So it's at some point you had to have had people there who indulged themselves in some kind of way the day before and confessed their sins the next day and repented going into the Lent season. To me, that is what kind of validates the 1703 claim in my mind.
I think it's bloody likely, but there is no source material. There's no diary. There's no letters. There's no nothing that mentions Mardi Gras at 27 Mile Bluff. Again, doesn't mean it didn't happen. I think considering that it was populated largely by French and French Canadians, that is fairly likely that there was certainly some recognition of the unofficial holiday, and it is an unofficial holiday.
Right. And I guess at the end of the day, too, it doesn't really matter, I guess, who started. Mobile and New Orleans both have incredible traditions. We talked about the Order of Mist. I mean, going back to 1868 and Infant Mystics, Comet Cowboys. I mean, all these are from the 19th century. Mobile Mardi Gras is not like St. Louis where 5 guys just decided to, form a Mardi Gras society in the 1980s. We've been doing this for a long time,
and it's been tried in a number of places. I've got a friend, Eddie Wolf, who one of the things he likes to research is where all Mardi Gras has happened. I mean, there was a Mardi Gras in Birmingham for several years, not a lot, and they had a king and the whole bit. I want to say it was like Crew of Vulcan, but it eventually petered out. And when people ask me why the Gulf Coast, what is so magic about the Gulf Coast, I say weather. It's weather. You go much farther north than here in late-ish February? Nobody wants to be outside. Not for an extended period of time. Dude, I can't feel my face, So that's why, people say, oh, look at this great party. We should have that great party here. Jeez, it's cold. So then, and every once in a while you get people who have like Mardi Gras in June and things like that don't make it.
Yeah.
That just say to me, you don't even understand what Mardi Gras is there for.
Exactly.
I mean, it's either got to be on Fat Tuesday or forget it.
All right, Port City Plate podcast. We've got to talk about food and carnival food.
I'm totally against food.
I think I think of course, chicken on a stick and funnel cakes and the food trucks and things like that. What are you and your wife, Miss Mask, that y'all go to every single parade?
We do. And first, let me say, food is why Mardi Gras was created. We're talking 12th, 13th century in Europe, when the rules of Lent changed to tell people had to fast from any kind of meat for the entire Lenten period. And the butchers of Europe said, what? How do you expect us to make a living? And so their idea, which they brought to the church, they said, how about we encourage people to just gorge themselves with meat before Lent starts? That way we get to sell a bunch of meat. And, we can just kind of sit back and count the profits and then wait for 40 days and then we'll go back to doing business. And the church basically said, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Go ahead. And so that was it. I mean, that's why Boeuf Gras, the fatted calf, is a major symbol of particularly early Mardi Gras, is that we were expected to gorge ourselves on meat before the Lenten period, and excess became essentially the watchword of Mardi Gras. So now Mardi Gras can be about excess of anything. Oh, you're smoking too much. Forget it. It's Mardi Gras. That kind of. So back to your question about food on the parade route.
Well, all right. What about, let's say, hypothetically, there was a parade, or not a parade, there was a Mardi Gras celebration, 1703. What do you think the celebration would have looked like? Food. What would the table have looked like?
Oh, boy.
1703.
Probably whatever they could get their hands on. I mean, I'm sure that one of the first things that they produced was alcohol of some kind. Because alcohol didn't spoil the way so many other liquids, including even water. I mean, if you keep water in a barrel long enough, it goes bad. Not because water goes bad, but because critters and things like that get in it and whatnot. But yeah, the alcohol was very useful to them because it really didn't go bad so fast. So I'm sure that was on the table for sure. A lot, they'd only been there for about a year. I mean, the move occurred. They moved from Mississippi to 27 Mile Bluff right around the Mardi Gras season of 1702. So they were very involved in just getting over there and surviving and stuff like that. So they'd been there a year. I'd be willing to bet most of their food at that time was still, they were doing a lot of trading with nearby Native Americans who were raising plenty of crops on their own. So there was probably, corn and that kind of thing. And plus whatever they were hunting in the woods up there.
Moving ahead to today, what are some of your favorite?
They had no moon pies.
No moon pies. No, that might be breaking news. What are some of your what's some of your favorite dishes that you and Miss Mask enjoy on the parade route?
We tend to bring food with us if it's going to be a long day. And she brings a lot of like slaw and salad and shrimp salad and stuff like that. Stuff that, hangs out in the cooler and the occasional sandwich and that kind of thing. Nothing too exotic. But we also get a hotel room at the end of Mardi Gras in the last few days so that we have kind of a real base of operation because, we're down there now like all day. And so she'll bring jambalaya from home and we'll warm it up in the microwave in the room and that kind of thing. I like a good sausage dog, lots of peppers and onions. I don't know if you can still get them, but I had a deep fried moon pie one time. Holy cow.
At the moon pie, when the moon pie store was here?
Huh?
Is that where you had it at the moon pie store?
No. It was out of out of one of the carts. Yeah, one of the food trucky things, and it was. I don't even know what kind of. It was almost a tempura batter, and they fried it right there in front of me, and then they just dumped powdered sugar all over it, of course, because it was nowhere near sweet enough up until that point. And I thought this is just going to be terrible, but by gosh, I'm going to be able to say I had a fried moon pie. And it turned out it was pretty good. It was pretty darn good.
I had one at the Moon Pie store when there was the Moon Pie store was in the Trustmark building. They had a deep fried moon pie.
Did they?
And yeah, it was phenomenal. But yeah, it's terrible for you, but it's Mardi Gras.
Well, and that's the whole point, is to wake up on Ash Wednesday and regret things that you did.
What about Mardi Gras 2023? What are some changes, or is there anything that we can expect that's going to be different this year? Have you heard any rumblings about 2023 so far?
The police department is talking about a new parade route, but we haven't seen yet how that's going to shake out. There's problems with Route A. Some groups are complaining that when they go around that Broad Street circle and they head back to Government on Washington, that they get held there, waiting for the tail of the parade to go south of Government on Washington. And so they've been trying to come up with a route that will accommodate that better. Parades are getting longer. Yes, they are held to 36 units. But when you have, for example, Mobile Mystics followed by Mobile Mystical Revelers followed by Mobile Mystical Friends, that's a possibility of over 100 units. They're not up there yet, but that the police department is saying, well, what if? What if these guys get up to over 100 units? What are we going to do at that point? So they're talking about yet another route J. Yeah, we're all the way up to J now. Although there's no Route I. I don't know why they didn't name this Route I. I don't know if there's some weird superstitious thing about I. I've got to find out why it's not Route I. But they're talking about Route J as not going back down Government and instead running down Canal and back to the Civic Center that way. And the last I heard, they were going to kind of offer that up as a choice for the groups to say, oh, well, I would like to take Route J instead of Route A, or maybe nobody will. But that's where it stands right now. That's the biggest change I've seen so far. There's one interesting organization that's coming along. It's for deaf people. It's the Deaf Mystics of the Galaxies.
Interesting.
I think I got the name right. They're just doing a ball right now. They would like to parade in the future, but just the whole idea of having a ball for deaf folks by deaf folks, I think that's
fantastic.
It's a really cool idea. Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that works out.
Tell us about the 2023 Mobile Mask issue that's going to be coming out. When is it going to hit the stands? What can we expect? What kind of stories are you working on for it?
Official first day of sales will be 12th night, January 6th. That's
not a day before.
Well, I spend probably between January 1st and January 6th getting them out to the stores. So, but I don't, and I may post a little picture and say, oh, look at this. Maybe you could find it.
It's not like the king cake. You can read the Mobile Mask before 12th night. It's okay.
It is possible to get one, yeah. But official first day of sales, and that's when I open up internet sales, is on January 6th. This year, there's going to be some really good stories. One that has been 10 years in the making is a story about the widows. And, every year I do a story I call the Spotlight Story. And that is one of the major Route A mystic societies. I profile the crew of Columbus, the Comet Cowboys, Inca, polka dots. I've done all those. And this year, the Spotlight Story is the widows, because I believe the widows are just as much a mystic society as the infant mystics. They're just smaller. But they have a president and they have committees, and everybody has a different job, and blah, 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 and they have meetings and gatherings, and they email each other. They operate as a mystic society. And they are also, I believe, the most secretive mystic society in South Alabama. And I tell, and that people go, oh, really? You think? Because, they expect me to say OOMs or something like that. And I say, oh, yeah, no. And here's why. Because if you're an infant mystic, or if you're in a Condi Cavalier, it's secretive mostly because it's fun. It's secretive because that's tradition and blah, 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 but mostly because it's fun. For the widows, secrecy is a necessity. If the women of Mobile County knew who they were, they would be camped out on their front lawns trying to join this organization that's limited at 20 members. Ladies will hand them cards and stuff with their contact information when they see the widows and say, oh, please, I want to be a widow. And it's understandable. I want to be a widow too. But yeah, the secrecy is a necessity for them. It's a very tight-knit group. And like I said, it took me 10 years, really, because you've seen stories of the widows before, but it's the widows doing their act, doing their shtick, that they've worked very hard over the years to develop. I mean, they each have a different, Zora May, type of name, and Coralie, and things like that. And they speak in these heightened Southern accents, and it just doesn't take long to get to Joe Loved Me Best and stuff like that. So, but I said, okay, I want to do a story, but I want to get past Joe Loves Me Best and talk about you guys, your history, how it started, how it continues, how you're structured, and treat you the way I treat any other mystic society. So that, I think, everybody's going to learn something about the widows they didn't know before.
That's good stuff. It probably took you 10 years to build trust for them to actually allow you in to get the story.
For them to feel good about me not taking it too far.
Yeah.
They know I will actually keep their identities secret, and that I won't, because I've said things to them during the interviews like, oh, well, don't tell me the name of the restaurant where you usually meet at, because, we don't want to direct people there. So just things that you're not gonna pick up any hints as to how to figure out who they are. That's for sure.
All right, before we get out of here, we got to talk about one more thing, and that's about restaurants in Mobile.
Okay.
What is your favorite restaurant in Mobile? Where do you and Miss Mask frequent often?
Well, we are WEMO inhabitants, so our hangouts tend to be well west of 65. I like Neighbors for lunch down in Tillman's Corner. Good fried chicken. You telling me where else you can get fried livers or fried gizzards?
No, you're not going to find that on the menu.
Awesome.
Hart's Fried Chicken, maybe?
Awesome. Awesome fried livers. I mean, just a plate of fried livers, and and they got Southern cooked vegetables and all that stuff, and that just sings to me. Craver's Seafood, way down Cottage Hill, hasn't been open all that long. It's good. I like Winsel's in WEMO. I like Heroes in WEMO. Gotta go to Bomb Hours Victory Grill and get some of those wings. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I've been eating those wings since we were in Birmingham. So
the original location, yeah.
Yeah. So
Tuscaloosa.
I think
Tuscaloosa was original, I think.
I think Tuscaloosa was original, but they opened up. We lived down 280 in Birmingham, which is essentially North Shelby County. And that area, I don't recognize that area anymore. I mean, it was building up when we moved there, and it's gone crazy since then. But boy, one of the first really good things that opened up out there was a Bomb Hours, and that was before he had other brands as well. It was just called Bomb Hours,
right?
And we would go there and watch football and eat wings. And boy, those garlic wings. We get the garlic wings, no heat, because I'm a baby, and extra garlic sauce on the side.
Okay.
And yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, you just can't do better. Don't go near anybody for the rest of the day. You get one little, and it's like, oh my Lord. But yeah, they're way too good.
That's good stuff. All right, well, then we're going to wrap it up. I hope everybody will check out the 2023 issue of the Mobile Mask coming out around January 1st through January 6th. You'll also see a Beanville Bites ad in there as well. So we're happy to partner up with Mobile Mask and Steve. But we thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for. We hope you, like I said, check out Steve online at Mobile Mask. Read his work, the publication, and check out our Facebook group, Port City Plate on Facebook. And please subscribe to our podcast, and we'll check you out on the next episode.